thank you for your patience. I'm sorry I don't have any fabulous like waiting room music. We could be humming something, but I don't have anything fabulous for you tonight. So I think that's a great idea. We want to make sure everyone gets the full benefit of tonight's program.
'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where you ought to be. And when you find yourself in the place just right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn will be our delight, till by turning we come round right.
That was lovely.
Oh.
Was that Kathleen Ross?
Yes, it was.
Thank you, Kathleen Ross. That was a rendition from our founding president, Dr. Kathleen Ross.
Oh, wow.
Good evening. My name is Dana Eliason, and I'm the Senior Director of Donor Development for Heritage University. And on behalf of Heritage University, which is an institution that was founded by women and where 70% of the student body are women, I want to welcome you all to this first annual Empower event. It's an event to celebrate, educate, and inspire. But before I continue, I would like to announce that we do have a Spanish language option, and I'm going to pause for just a moment and let Huvin offer any language option instructions if you need it. Huvin?
English with Spanish.
Okay, thank you, Huvin. While we had hoped to see all of you in person, we know that's not possible. So here we are again for another virtual event. And first of all, I'd like to especially thank Treetop, who is our presenting sponsor, and for supporting this important event. And in addition, a big thank you to the community partners who were really instrumental in the planning of this event. I'd like to mention Junior League, the League of Women Voters, Casa Hogar, United Way, Volunteer Attorney Services, Nuestra Casa, Yakima Ywca, and the Washington State Women's Commission. And now, it is an honor to introduce to you our first speaker for the evening, Virginia Hislop. Virginia Hislop is Yakima's most beloved centenarian. I'm sorry, I said that incorrectly. I knew Kathleen Ross would correct me. And from her earliest days, Virginia's grandmother was one of the most influential people in her life. And because of her, Virginia grew up with an appreciation for education, public service, and the tenacity to stand up against social injustices. She has always been a woman who leads, has challenged the status quo, and has forged new paths. She's been doing just that in the Yakima Valley since she arrived here with her husband in 1946. She has advocated for women in education through her work with Junior Aid, which is now Junior League, the Yakima School District, Yakima Valley College, and Heritage University, to name just a few. Virginia is a change maker who's worked to ensure that every woman is healthy, safe, educated, and empowered to achieve their full potential. She is my friend, my mentor, and she's a great storyteller. Please welcome Virginia Hislop.
Thank you, Dana. It's going to be awfully hard to live up to that. I did beat the 19th Amendment by 10 months. So I've always grown up thinking that, of course, women voted. Ridiculous. We lived at my grandmother's in a great big Victorian house. There were 8 of us at table. My grandmother, who was a leader and a pusher for women's rights. Her 2 daughters, one was a principal of an elementary school and the other was in public relations. and my father, who was a lawyer, and my mother and my cousin Charles. And if people think that I'm a little blunt, and occasionally I've been told that, it's because I had to sit and listen to all the goings on at the dinner table. And I was not excused until after I had finished my dessert. And when I got up and curtsied and thanked my grandmother and got away, because the dinner table conversations were, shall we say, heated from time to time. It was during the time of the 18th Amendment as well as the 19th. So there were conversations about the ins and outs of either standing by the 18th Amendment or looking the other way and paying off the local bootlegger. As far
And the 18th Amendment was prohibition, wasn't it, Virginia?
it was,
Okay.
I don't think it made a lasting impression on me, truly. The first political thing that I can remember was the women's club movement, which in Los Angeles was quite noticeable. Women had the right to vote and they were thrilled. And there were several different groups, but the one I'm most familiar with was the one that my Aunt Ruth was concerned with. And they met for lunch once a month downtown, and they had a speaker. And that was unheard of. That was a big change from Bridge and What Are Your Children Doing? So I usually had a preview of the speaker because Aunt Ruth would have them at the house for dinner. So that was quite exciting. As far as my first memory of being involved, only peripherally, with an election was 1928. We had a great big Atwater Kent radio with the Morning Glory speaker. It was in the study, and we all sat around it and listened to the voices of people in New York. This was very exciting, especially as the governor of New York was the Democratic candidate. And the other candidate was our own Californian, Herbert Hoover. Unfortunately for Mr. Hoover, he was elected in 1928. He was inaugurated March 3rd, 1929, and most of you know what happened in October of that year. With the start of the Great Depression, everything changed. Instead of having vacations, we went down to our beach house off and on, but no big trips. And it was pathetic to have people come to the door and knock and ask if they could work for food. That made a lasting impression on me. When FDR was elected in 1932, the first 100 days brought in so many things that constituted the New Deal that it really was starting over, and people were ready for a change. And after 2 terms, we were almost in war, not quite. The war had started in Europe, but in 1940, we were still not out of it. But you could see that it was certainly a possibility. And so Franklin D. Roosevelt ran for a 3rd term. That was the first time that I could vote. I turned 21 in June. And I thought a 3rd term was just not a good idea. So I voted for Wendell Willkie. That was my first vote. And I'm proud to say I voted in every presidential election since. Not always for the winners, but I voted. And I'm so pleased that Heritage is helping put the spotlight on women so that they can not only do their share of the community work, which they do and probably more beside, but to let them know that they can influence what's going on. Mm-hmm. And by all means, register and vote. I know I can't say vote often, but I wish you could. So with those thoughts, I hope that you'll really pay attention to your ballot, get it in, and whether you bring it in personally or vote in person or mail it, just be sure to do it. And thank you so much.
Oh, Virginia, thank you so much for that. You're just a very special person in our community, and thank you. We're truly grateful for all that you've done to empower women and our community in general. Now it's my privilege to introduce you to Regina Malveaux, our moderator for the evening, and who will be in a town hall discussion. As the newly appointed director of the Washington State Women's Commission, leads a team of commissioners who work to improve the well-being of women in the state of Washington. And Regina has over 20 years of experience as a tenacious advocate for women and children. Prior to the commission, Regina served as CEO of the YWCA of Spokane. And through her work, Regina has established a national reputation as an aggressive advocate on issues related to women and their family. And joining Regina tonight in this town hall discussion is Risha Cosby, our local on-air personality and morning radio show host, and most notably, the first African-American board president of the YWCA of Yakima in its 110-year history. Risha has a mission of eliminating racism, empowering women, and promoting space, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. And now please welcome these two remarkable and inspirational women who will be framing the issues for our time together tonight. Regina, Risha.
Thank you so much, Dana. Again, as Dana outlined, I'm Regina Malveaux. I'm the director of the Washington State Women's Commission and the governor's newest appointee. And I spoke with him this morning and he sent his best wishes. And I think it's important for everyone here to know what a commitment he has to women and the disproportionate challenges that we face. And I feel so grateful to have the opportunity to lead the commission. We have 9 brilliant commissioners. One of them is here with us tonight, Quinn. She's on the panel and you'll get to meet her in a bit. And I'm really honored to frame this next part of the conversation with Risha, who, as we've said, is the board president of the YWCA Yakima, and just reiterating Dana's point that the mission of the YWCA is eliminating racism, empowering women, and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. The YWCA nationally has been involved in literally every social justice movement since 160 years ago. So really grateful that we have Risha here representing the YW, and will tell us later on a little bit about how we can get involved in some of the initiatives that tie to our discussion tonight. Really want to kind of outline what our evening's going to look like. So with us tonight on the panel, you'll get to meet Quinn Dalan. She's the executive director of Yakima Volunteer Attorney Services. Representative Debra Lekanoff, and she is the legislative representative of District 40, which includes parts of Whatcom, Skagit, and San Juan counties. We will also meet Representative Gina Mosbrucker, who's the legislative representative from District 14, representing Klickitat County, and Magaly Solis, who is the Citizen Program Director of Casa Hogar. So we have just a really extraordinary panel for you to hear from, and we're excited to get to that. But first, Risha and I were just going to have a little bit of discussion about some of the issues that we really think that women should be engaged in and be considering. I believe we have 19 or 20 days until the election, and some of the things that we're going to talk about really are critical issues that we all want to consider as we head into that time. And so kind of the key issues that I think we've seen this year really focus on issues that impact women. We know that particularly in the time of COVID and the social unrest we've had, we want people to really be aware of the issues that they can get behind as change makers. Going back to Virginia's point about the 19th Amendment, so just as Virginia, I believe, turned 100 this year, as did the 19th Amendment in August. And it's an important, really important milestone for us to celebrate and acknowledge, though it's really also important to acknowledge that we know that the right to vote did not, in fact, include all women. And Risha is going to tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here tonight. And I'm coming to you from my kitchen, which is my heart and my home. And so I do all my business here and all my meetings. And I really love doing the YWCA board meetings from here. I get that sense of community and that the fact that women have fought so hard to get that right to vote. And a lot of people didn't realize until recently that the 19th Amendment didn't grant all women the right to vote. In fact, Native American women received the right to vote during the Indian Citizenship Act of 1924. And then Asian, the AAPI women in 1952 with the McCarran-Walter Act. And then Black women didn't receive the right to vote until the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And so it's important to see how all of these groups had to wait officially until 1965 when all women were able to vote. And so they didn't have those restrictions anymore. And if you notice, currently we have our Senate Majority Leader who refuses to reauthorize the Voting Rights Act. And that impacts all of us, whether we are Native American men and women, Black, Asian, Pacific Islander, Latinx. And so it's on us to make sure that we get that done. And right now it feels like there's open season on our voting rights, because right now, regardless of our gender identity, it's full steam ahead. It's full steam ahead, basically, if you are Black, Asian, Latinx, Hispanic, Asian, and basically there are efforts right now to suppress the vote. And that includes Texas, where you get one drop box ballot per county. You get some of the mailing ballots are being intercepted. You get early registration votes being cut off. And so we are blessed to be in Washington State, where we don't have to wait for hours and hours to get our ballots mailed out. But I do encourage people to vote early, vote often. In fact, today, I just got my voting ballot in the mail. I was so excited about that, Regina. And so this isn't an accident that voter suppression efforts are happening even in 2020. It's like, I'm from the South. And so we have a saying, miss me with that mess, basically. I wasn't born at night. I was born at night, but not last night. So I see the voter suppression efforts being made. You're still muted.
Hey, I think occasionally it's important to mute me, so I think we didn't go wrong with that. Thank you so much. So I think, Risha, in everything that you outlined, the core point that we get is really how sacred the vote is and how hard many people worked to make sure that women could vote, and then that all women could vote. And we have, again, about 19 or 20 days, and it's so important for women to engage, to return their ballots. As you pointed out, here in Washington State, we have an entire vote by mail system, and we have not seen any voter suppression efforts here in our state, and we are very fortunate in that regard. Because there really are some key issues this year that we are looking at that are certainly tied to the election. So we know that women have been the most affected by COVID-19. Job loss, childcare access, virtual schooling, also issues related to immigration. We know that women have been hardest hit by job losses in the pandemic, and in fact, economists are actually referring to this as the she-cession as opposed to the recession, because there's been a disproportionate impact of job loss. with women. We know that many low-wage workers who are disproportionately female are less likely to be rehired, and the jobs that they were lost are permanent losses. And it is, in fact, the Department of Labor has indicated that women have never experienced an unemployment rate in the United States in double digits since the Bureau of Labor Statistics began reporting in 1948 until now. So that is, very, very significant that the rate of unemployment is so high for women. And also we know Latinas have experienced the bulk of job losses, and the unemployment rate for them is around 20%. And so again, I think just kind of the core issues that are facing our nation and even our state really have to do with the economy, its impact on women, and the impact to families where many women are still, I think Risha referred to it as the heartbeat of their families, and are most often the ones who are caring for older loved ones, and oftentimes the ones who are having to give up jobs in order to do virtual schooling. And so again, we know that all these issues really, really important, and things that we want to be paying attention to as we listen to the candidates and what their platforms are relative to the issues that really impact our lives. And then that's a lot of bad news, but the good news is that out of the pain of all the experiences that we've had this year, including the COVID response and social unrest, there's been a huge demand for change after the George Floyd murder, and it really brought together people of all ages, races, and regions, and has created the largest movement for change really since the civil rights movement in the 80s. We also know that it has opened honest but sometimes difficult dialogue between people of color and those who are not. And really many people who consider themselves allies have not only spoken up, but they've spoken about wanting to know more about the issues that impact communities of color, the Black community in particular, and really want to better understand the issues and how to be stronger allies. Risha is going to talk a little bit speak with us about some challenges that she's experienced previously when faced with working in partnership with those who are really desiring to help be a part of official change and perhaps challenged in it.
That's right. I am a junior league sustainer, and we recently participated in the 21-day race challenge. And so I was the only Black woman in our group. There was about 4 white ladies and myself. And at first I felt like, do I belong here? Am I supposed to be here? Because this is a conversation I felt like they should be having without putting the burden on me to educate them. Because I was hearing a lot of, oh, I'm learning so much, and a lot of questions that it just started to take a emotional toll on me. And I wasn't expecting that. The challenge is over now, and I've grown so much from that. And what I did realize is that the fact that women are trying, white women are trying, especially with this particular challenge that I was in, seeing that, it was like a sense of relief. And so I did hear one of them say that she was no longer going to call herself an ally. And the reason why she said that was we had some research to do about that. There's a podcaster named Monique Melton. She's an anti-racism educator and a podcaster, and she does the work of trying to help educate white people about eliminating racism and bigotry. And here's what she had to say. I'll read it for you. Allyship is not the goal of this work, not even close. Allyship, or calling yourself an ally, implies that there's a destination. There's a starting point and a stopping point, and you get to be a participant, and then you get to leave when you're done. But being an ally is actually a lifelong journey. And so anti-racism is not a noun and it's not an identity, just like being an ally should not be an identity. And she also went on to say that the goal of being an ally is to help dismantle racism from the inside out, because it's that system that we live in that's giving you privilege based on your skin color, and being an ally is not going to cut it. And so the point of me saying this is that the onus is on everyone to take on responsibility for fighting against anti-Black language, thoughts, actions, legislative policies at the local, state, and federal levels. And there's a website, Sentimental Garbage, and the author there said, I suggest we retire the word ally in favor of something simpler, the word decency. Decency is a quality, not a title. And decency isn't something you achieve, it's a lifelong project. Calling yourself an ally becomes a thing you can point to on your wall like a trophy. So my message today is, from this day forward, stop calling yourself an ally. Call yourself a decent human being. And if you look at the YWCA, which is the organization that's dear to my heart, they provide resources, and we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Thank you so much, Risha. Again, we know that in today's climate, it's so important for all of us to learn and to engage where we have opportunities. I know so many people wonder, well, what can I do? And so I was hoping that you could give us some examples of initiatives that the YWCA is leading. So efforts like Why Women Vote and Until Justice Just Is, and maybe tell folks how they could learn more about those and kind of where to go to get that information, kind of a website or phone number.
Perfect. The YWCA in Chicago created a website called untiljusticeis.org, and it's being used all over the country, in fact, all over the world. And there are two things that you listening, we have 105 participants on this call. Here's two things you can do as soon as this Empower Her event is over. The first thing is you can sign up for the workplace trainings at untiljusticeis.org. You have to be brave. Being an ally, we're going to throw that word out the window. Being decent is being brave. And so it's up to you to get that courage to talk to your workplace. I have to do the same thing. And there are workplace trainings there available. Also, too, download the Learning Library. It's on a PDF. You can save it to your phone or your laptop and review it. And then you can take these steps, whether they're large or small. The important thing is that you are being decent, a decent human being, and being part of the change for Native American women, for Black women, for Latinx women, for Asian American Pacific Islander women, because we've had enough, we're done. So we want to change these things, and we need everyone to come together.
Thank you so much, Risha. I've so enjoyed the few times that we've had the opportunity to interact. The level of passion that you have, the level of knowledge you have is something that's so helpful for all of us. And again, tonight, really our goal is to look at what are the ways that women can be engaged, both relative to the vote and to social change. And really, I'd like to end the town hall part of our conversation with Risha and I in giving another call of action. So we know that, again, one of the most important things that any of us can do is not only vote ourselves, but really work to be someone who inspires civic engagement and voting with everybody in our sphere of influence. And so, again, that means, talking to your children who are of voting age, talking to your grandmother, talking to your neighbors. There's so many people who maybe are interested in voting, but really don't understand how or where to do that. So again, if you have family in other states, a lot of times folks are looking to us for leadership, even within our own network of friends and family. And so over the next couple of weeks, reach out to everyone you know, talk to them about what their voting plan is. And if they're not clear, help them with some resources. And if you're someone who's still struggling with not necessarily whether to vote, but how to vote, my mother told me, I'm just overwhelmed by this. You know, I don't know who most of these people are. I don't know what they stand for. And so while all of us here in Washington did receive a voter guide, which is an important first place to start, there are also organizations like the League of Women Voters who really study the candidates and issues, and they do a great outline on their page. Also, if you don't know anything about a particular candidate, whether it's local, state, or federal, you know, visit their website and read what their position and platforms are on the issues that you care about. And that's really how to become an educated voter. And again, we know that women have always been had a significant impact on election results, and this year really should be no different. And with that, I want to open up the discussion to our illustrious panel to share their thoughts on some of these issues that we've just outlined, and a couple that they have of their own. And I've organized the order of our speakers tonight alphabetically. And so let's start with Commissioner and Executive Director Quinn Dalan. I'm looking for Quinn. There she is.
They're popping in right now. They'll be here shortly. Hopefully we've got all your panelists there. If you can check that, Regina, real quick before you get started. Can you see them all there?
Let me double check. Yes, I do.
Okay,
yes.
Excellent.
And I see that Quinn is muted, so we'll need to unmute her. There we go. All right, awesome. So Quinn, I was hoping that you could give me your thoughts on what would you say to a mom, you know, of young kids, you know, school-age children, teenagers, a mom who says, I just don't have time to be engaged. I just don't have time. What would you say to a mom or a grandmother in that position?
Well, I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, so I know all about that age, and it is exhausting. But I think, you know, you can't do everything, right? You want to prioritize your children, you want to be with your children. But at the same time, the world is moving, and the world that they are going to inherit as adults is going to be directly impacted with what you do. So that's one of the reasons why I'm motivated to give back and get involved and change some of this world right now, so that when my children are adults, they have a better world that they're part of, and their peers, right? There are children that don't have the resources my kids have. Their peers have a better world also. And I think it's good for kids. I mean, I make my kids, I haul them around with me all the time. I have them engaged. You know, they've been to feed homeless and drop off Rotary bags to collect canned goods. They can't come to everything. But, you know, I think if they grow up with service and giving back to the community, I mean, we get to vote every 4 years or so, but we can make a daily impact on what we want to see in our community every day.
Thank you so much. That's so important. I too was a mother who took my children to vote with me. And in fact, in the 2008 election, I called home 3 times to find out if my son, who had just become voting age, had voted, and felt very much understood that that encouragement caused him to come home with a voting sticker. Representative Lekanoff, what I was hoping is that you could, kind of following on Risha's earlier point, tell us a little bit about the additional impact of voter disenfranchisement for Native women, not just historically, but really even today.
You know, thank you. Risha, thank you for your wonderful words today, because it really does empower us to remember we as women of color, we all have a little bit of color in each and every one of us across this great nation. As your first American and the only Native American to serve in the Washington State Legislature, I just reach out to all of you to remember that we have an opportunity to uplift our communities, to make sure when we vote, our voices are heard. And I think that the relationship that we have with our Native American communities is deeply rooted in the fact that although we received the allowance to vote in the 19th Amendment, it took 50 years for every state to allow Native Americans to vote. And those are Native American women. And today, a part of my work that I do within the community is reaching out to our Native American communities and reaching out especially to our women, such as Patsy Whitefoot from Yakima Nation, and saying, we as aunties, we as grandmothers, we as mothers, we as sisters, we as students need to remember that it is our ability to make sure our voices are heard as the first Americans, as this great nation, to say, I want to vote, I will vote, I matter. I matter as the first American of this great country, to say, I will be part of this ability to vote, this right to vote, and I will make sure that every decision that is made within this great nation, this great America that is mine first, will be incorporated into decision making. And that comes with taking your vote, taking your ballot, delivering it into the ballot box. We have an incredible caucus across this nation that really is recognizing, reaching out to our Native American community. And for me, in my Tlingit community, coming from Alaska and reaching out to my community here in Washington, we are a matriarchal community, which means we are the ones who look upon our young ones, and we say, similar to what Ywca said, is we are the aunties that reach out and say, niece, have you voted? We're the grandmothers who say, grandchildren, have you voted? We're the sisters that said, sister, have you voted? We are the mothers that reach back and say, children, it is so important for you to recognize that you have a voice and it is within a ballot and you must vote. So as a representative of Washington State, we have to recognize voting is not a Republican or a Democratic decision. It is a decision of both parties. To vote really is embracing being an American. And as a first American of this great nation, where my roots, my names, my values, and my cultures are intertwined within the land, the water, the air, and the resources, it is just natural for me to say, you know, Representative Mosbrucker, you are a wonderful friend of mine. You are a person who reaches out across all parties. And at the end of the day, she, along with many representatives in both the Republican and the Democratic Party, just say this: we as women have a great value within our community to urge our next generation and the generation before us to vote. And we stand, I think, arm in arm, hand in hand, hip in hip, smile and smile, and say, we just need to be able to support our communities to be educated and make an informed decision, be able to reach out to those before us and after us, and make sure that we are part of the community that says our voice matters. But if you want your voice to matter, you need to step up and make sure that you're engaged. And I have to tell you, Ywca, I'm sitting at a very old kitchen table in my house that I am seated, and my kitchen table is the same kitchen table where I sat with my grandmother, raised similar to like you, who couldn't read or write, but she wanted to make sure that she voted on who the next mayor was. And she was born in the years of Virginia. And even though she couldn't read, as a 7-year-old, I was trying to read as best as I could the ballot and help her vote. And watching my grandmother, who the only thing she could write was to sign her name, I value that you're sitting at your kitchen table and that I'm sitting at my kitchen table. And we're bringing this conversation forward to empower women. So I raise my hands in my Tlingit culture. Ganesh Chish means thank you with all the honor that I have in my heart. So with that, Regina, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. I feel so inspired. We've talked about this evening being one where we are going to celebrate women's right to vote, educate, which I think we've all done here, and inspire. And certainly that was very inspiring. I really appreciate one point that you really pointed out as I transition to Representative Mosbrucker. You really pointed out that voting is not a Republican or a Democratic issue. So all of us are acutely aware of just how divisive the world is right now, and how really there are firmly entrenched Republican and Democratic not only ideals but conflict. And one of the things that Representative Mosbrucker and I talked about briefly the other day was just how well many of the women representatives in Washington state do work together in a bipartisan way, particularly as it relates to issues around women. And so I was hoping she could talk, or Representative Mosbrucker, I was hoping that you could talk a little bit more about that.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. This is a great conversation. Beautiful words by Virginia, Risha, and of course, my beautiful colleague, Debra. It's an honor to be here, and it's a challenge to be a woman in the legislature. So it's interesting to hear different perspectives, and the things that you think when you're going to run for office and you're going to do to change the world usually aren't the things that you do. And there are things, I think the biggest takeaway was that, like I told you, there's 90% of policy issues that we work on that are not partisan. You know, where we're told in the media they're partisan and you have to be on one side or the other, but you really don't. Education, healthcare, you've got businesses, labor, you've got safety. None of those are partisan issues. And it's so important to reach across and pull everyone in who's touched by these issues in order to better understand. And I've been very blessed to have amazing colleagues that are willing to do that. It's difficult at times because you end up crossing party lines, I think they call it. But I went there to fix things. I was called by my faith to go to Olympia and to make the change, like Gandhi says, be the change that I wanted to see. And I'm just grateful to get that opportunity. I think that everyone here, all of us have a gift, and we have a purpose, a way in which we should serve and we should help the world that we're privileged enough to live in. And I encourage people to find yours. You know, we don't know what it is necessarily, but you just keep pushing forward until you find why you're here. And when you understand that, even though it's not maybe what you chose, you can make great things happen. And I love talking to women's groups, especially. They're always my favorite because there's so much more optimism, so much more hope than other groups often. And it just encourages me and inspires to know why I'm doing the work I'm doing in a difficult time. You know, leading in a pandemic through the fog with no roadmap at all for all of us has been challenging. We have to really rely on something, and I rely on my faith. You know, we need leaders, and I'm sure there's many of them out there. I'm sure that everyone is, in the sense, who you know, they hear this, they want to be the sound for those that don't have a voice. And whether I was working on missing and murdered Indigenous women, I was called to do that work, not something I'd planned on. Whether I was working on untested rape test kits and having to live in that dark world of, you know, women who had been abused and raped and then thought their test was turned in. They thought it was tested. And 20 years later, we're knocking on the door telling them it wasn't. And it's just, you know, sitting with those survivors and hearing all the things in Washington state that we could have done better is so important. It's challenging, it's difficult, and that and both the Native American missing and murdered women, those bills have risen up because they weren't just Washington issues. They were national issues. They're world issues. And there's so much more. I pray at night and I wonder what the next big thing is. I mean, I wonder why I'm still here and why I keep still pushing forward to make big change. I'm go big or go home. And the more difficult, the better for me. I seem to thrive in difficulty. So I've had amazing people to help me do incredible things, and I just feel incredibly blessed. You know, we have to care for the vulnerable that are in society. It's not partisanship. Everybody has to care for them. It's our duty and honor to be in this world. And if we're not giving back, if we're not going out on a homeless search and rescue and handing out, you know, cheese sticks or socks, or if we're not doing that, we're not fulfilling that purpose. And I just encourage everyone listening to find that purpose and to shape that, to help design the world that we want our children, our daughters, to grow up in, because it's our responsibility to create that. And when we sit back and complain and don't engage, we have a lesser democracy. Engagement means opportunity, and we've got to keep that opportunity for the current generation and the ones behind us. So just honored to be here. I'm so happy to help you celebrate this 100-year ratification of the 19th Amendment. I'm excited to vote. Klickitat County, I have Yakima, Klickitat, Skamania, and Clark. I think Yakima is the only one that has their ballots yet. But I'm very excited to get to vote. And I just am so thankful for all the hard work and sacrifice people made it so that I can cast that ballot. Thank you for inviting me today.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I want to thank both of you as legislators for all that you do. Representative Mosbrucker, you made the point that the reasons that you thought you were going to the State House don't always end up being, you don't always end up having the opportunity to work just on the issues that you care about. And so, and so really appreciate you both for your leadership. One of you mentioned about the different way that women in leadership make decisions and collaborate. And so that's been exciting for me to watch. I'm looking forward to the Women's Commission having the opportunity to work with everyone in the legislature, but particularly the Women's Caucus. So know that you will be hearing from me in the future. And I'd like to transition to Magaly Solis, who is really has a great story to tell and some real wisdom. Magaly, I'm hoping that you can talk about the importance for new citizens to understand and exercise their right to vote, and perhaps talk a little bit about some of the impediments that you think might preclude them from doing so or create fear around voting.
Thank you. Thank you, Heritage, for putting this amazing event together. And thank you to all the panelists. I feel truly honored to be sharing this space with all of you tonight. First of all, before I answer the question, I would like to acknowledge that in our community, there is a large number of immigrants that, because of their immigration status, are not able to become U.S. citizens and to access the right to vote. There are many that are able to do that, and those are the people that I get to work at La Casa. I've been working for La Casa for 6 years, and I'm proud to say that during that time, 1,200 people have successfully completed the process and become U.S. citizens. That's only about 12% of the total number of eligible lawful permanent residents in Yakima County that could become U.S. citizens and eventually access the right to vote. So we still have a lot of work to do to encourage more people to become U.S. citizens if they're eligible to, and also to support them during that difficult process. I want to say that one key or core component of our program, our citizenship program, is that we talk about the rights and responsibilities of U.S. citizens. We also talk about the many different ways, because there are many different ways besides voting that people can be engaged in our different systems, can engage civically in our different systems. And I am just really proud to say that many of the students that go through our program do register to vote. We know because we go to the ceremonies with them, and right after they receive their certificate and now they're U.S. citizens, they're completing their voter registration and are exercising their right to vote. Many of them are not only voting for themselves, but they vote for their families if they are in mixed status, mixed immigrant status, they're also voting for their families that don't have the right or the opportunity to vote, or their neighbors or their community as well. The second part of your questions, I was referring about some of the barriers or challenges. Of course, I think education and access to information is really critical in allowing someone to be able to know how to register to vote. And we know how complicated the voting ballots can be. So if they sometimes need additional support in order to be able to successfully engage in vote. The other thing that I see as well is that as immigrants, we need to feel that we truly belong in the community. We need to feel that we are seen, that we are heard, that we are valued, that we are represented. And once we feel and all these needs are met, we will be more likely to engage in many different in these democratic systems, because we are truly part of the community. And as I mentioned, voting is a really an important way that you can be engaged civically, but it's not the only way. So there are many opportunities that we can, as a community, create and invite many different voices to be part of the decision-making tables, so that we all get to experience that and truly feel like we're part of the community. I would like to just end with one quick message, because we know that we have our Spanish-speaking audience, so this will be in Spanish. Para todos los que nos están viendo en casa y son elegibles para... Can I do solamente en español, joven? Para los que me escuchan en la casa y son elegibles para votar, animarlos a que se registren para votar y voten. Y animen a sus familiares a votar también. Esto es un momento crítico y que recuerden que su voto es su voz. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think Dana is kind of segueing to the next piece of our discussion.
Well, thank you, Regina. What a great panel. I wish we had more time so we could continue these conversations, but we do have one more speaker for the evening, and that is Cady Padilla. And Cady is the executive director at Nuestra Casa and an alumni of Heritage University, as well as Magaly. And at Nuestra Casa, she is responsible for the operational plan that fulfills their mission to educate, empower, and support immigrant women. And Cady herself is the daughter of immigrants who settled in the lower Yakima Valley in 1990. And while attending Heritage, she connected with the idea that one could best give back to their community by connecting with their head for business and a heart for the world. Recently, Cady became a newly naturalized U.S. citizen, and she's going to share with us what it means to vote for the first time. Welcome, Cady.
Uh-oh.
Cady, can we do a quick check here? We can't hear you. Can you maybe switch? I don't know if you're in the interpreter. If you can turn off your English, maybe go to English. I think you're in the other one, and I don't blame you.
Can you hear me now?
There we go. You got it. Welcome.
All right. Thank you, Dana. It is a pleasure to share this space with all of you this evening. What a time to be alive. We are currently at a pivotal moment in this nation's history. The portion of history we celebrate today in honor of women's suffrage, which we recognize is not inclusive of us, women of color, serves as a reminder that there is still a lot to be done in order to reach equality for all. I was invited into this space to share what it means to me to be participating in my first presidential elections as a new citizen of the United States. Before I touch on that, I must honor the journey that has brought me here today. My family immigrated to the U.S. in 1990, and I was raised here in the lower Yakima Valley. I had the opportunity to apply for adjustment of status as an adult and became a legal permanent resident in 2013. In 2017, I joined the Nuestra Casa team, a small nonprofit focused on the advancement of immigrants, as their new executive director. As part of my onboarding and learning about Nuestra Casa's programs, I volunteered in the citizenship preparation classes. Here, I found myself among a classroom full of adults who attended classes twice a week after spending 10+ hours working in agriculture. I was touched by their dedication to overcome the many barriers needed to pass the naturalization interview and felt inspired to apply for naturalization myself. Fast forward to February of 2020, I took the United States oath and became a U.S. citizen. Voting in the upcoming elections for me means helping ensure that this American democracy lives up to its greatest promise of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all. As I prepare to cast my vote, I will vote deliberately for those who still can't access their voting rights because of a multitude of barriers, for those whose vote is being intentionally suppressed, those whose lives are not being protected, for the children in cages who are still without their parents, for those without access to affordable health care, and for all the individuals who have been waiting for months and some even over a year to naturalize. I will be voting intentionally for candidates that address these issues directly. Are you voting? I'd also like to point out that there are many ways anyone, regardless of status, can participate in promoting our civic duties, one of which is to vote. Regardless of status, you can help folks determine if they are eligible to vote and help them register if they are. It only takes a few minutes, but the impact is long-lasting. Hold the ballot party to discuss candidates and help others make an educated vote. Volunteer with community organizations leading voter engagement efforts throughout the county and state as an interpreter, and help your friends and family create a voting plan. So, I challenge you to continue to protect the impact of votes of women, and more specifically, women of color. As a community, we need to support substantial and targeted efforts to engage, protect, and energize eligible voters. We must defend our community from the attempts to undermine our political power that has kept us in the shadows. We need to continue making ourselves visible. Voting and being civically engaged will do that, not only for us, but for generations to come. We can make the difference in these elections. We have a historic opportunity to change the course of this state and nation. We must be heard, we must mobilize, and we must vote. Thank you all so much for having me here today.
Cady, I am so excited and so inspired that this is your first election. You are clearly a powerful leader in your own right and in your community. All the points you just outlined make clear to me that you need to be in the state legislature along with our 2 representatives. So somebody's going to reach out to you to encourage that. But again, just want to thank you for sharing such a compelling and exciting story with us. And with that, Dana, I know we're at 8 o'clock, so why don't you guide us into kind of any next step?
Sure, and thank you, Cady, for that. Thank you, Regina. We are officially at our 1 hour time into our program, and on behalf of Heritage, I want to thank you all for joining us for this very important conversation. Once again, we couldn't have done this without the support of our sponsor, Treetop, and I just want to say that we heard a strong message all evening, and we as citizens, but especially as women, play a pivotal role in promoting social change, policy reform, and equality. So please vote. Voting is power. And while we're out of time, the speakers have all agreed to stay on a while longer to answer any of your questions. So if you can't stay with us, I understand. And we will create a post-event email that will be distributed to each of you with the information on how to support our collective organizations, and also how you can find support through our partner organizations. And some of your questions will also be answered through this email communication. And so if you want to stay on, we welcome that opportunity for this continued conversation. And I'm going to turn it back to Regina. And again, thank you all for joining us. Thank you to our partner organizations. And now, Regina, back to you.